Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's BA Insight session. Today, we're talking about real lessons from the real world applied to business analysis. I think it'll be quite an interesting conversation and another way to consolidate our BA expertise, but also maybe bring some of that expertise into our everyday lives as well as we need to. And I've got an excellent guest to join us on that conversation. Just before we get into that, we'll do some introductions in a moment. But even before that, I should just ask if you're not already subscribed, please do so and drop a like on the video as that helps. And it will also be interesting to hear your perspectives on as well on either what you've brought from the real world into business analysis or taken from BA into the real world as well. So any comments be appreciated. But let's start with you to do an introduction if you could.
Thanks so much, John. Firstly, let me say I'm really glad to be here today with you to have a conversation on the real world lessons that you can apply to the BA job. So, my name is Sagar. I am a business analyst working at Spectrum, which is one of the biggest telecommunications and wireless companies in the United States. I've been working here for the last 4 years, and prior to that, I was working for Zain Bahrain, which is another telecommunications company in the Middle East. And I've always been someone who really likes to be observant of how things operate in the real world. Things fascinate me. I'm an avid reader. I love watching sports. I love watching movies and talking to people. I'm a very curious person, if I could say that. And through my conversations, through my readings, through my different um, knowledge that I attain, I try to see is there anything that I can do to apply to my job to become a better business analyst. And that's what we are here to discuss today. So really glad to be here, and can't wait to share my insights.
Excellent, brilliant. I think so. We'll just dive straight into it then, really, in terms of can experience, techniques, or just general approaches from our personal life, can they be applied to business analysis?
It's Thank you so much for asking that question. It depends. So there's no fixed answer on how you can apply lessons, but it's about little things and paying attention to little things. So whenever I'm having, the other day, I was in the cafeteria and talking to my fellow business analysts from my team, and she was mentioning something really interesting that. She once worked at Starbucks as a barista, and she was telling me how important it is to get orders correct. While a lot of the orders are very general, like I want one small latte, or I want one medium cappuccino, which is very straightforward. But there are times when you get customers who have these extremely detailed and elaborate orders, who are like, I want two shots of espresso, skimmed milk, no whipped cream, a shot of cinnamon. And that's when it becomes important to listen, and it's important to make sure you get their requirements right. And then I was like, this is so similar to how we elicit requirements from the client. And she was like, yeah, that does make sense. And then I asked her, like, so what do you think is the biggest lesson here? She's like, it's really important to listen. It's really important to make sure that you get the little things right. And if you have any questions, you confirm. And I'm like, yes, that makes sense. And that is something we do in the business analysis world as well. So we have to make sure that we get the right questions, and sometimes we ask follow-up questions. For example, if when it could be something like in the Starbucks, when someone is taking the order, when they say, like, you want to have a coffee. What kind of coffee do you want? A cappuccino, an espresso, a latte. If someone says they want milk, what kind of milk? Do you want an oat milk? Do you want skimmed milk? Do you want regular milk, non-fat milk? And similarly, when someone tells you that they want a certain feature or a certain functionality, you ask them follow-up questions, like, what is the pain point? Why are we building this? What are we trying to solve here? How will this make the life of the end user better? How will this look like on UI? And where do we want it to be placed? Are we removing certain things from a UI to make it or are we just adding this? Should this show up as a pop-up, and so on? So it's asking the right questions and making sure that you get the exact requirement so that it is clear, it is uh, and you don't leave any discrepancies or any gaps. But essentially, to answer your questions, it can come from anywhere. It is about paying attention to little things and observing what you can do. But at the core of it, it's important to always try to have that thirst of becoming a better business analyst, if I may say.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, totally agree. I think it's interesting you mentioned a couple of those examples around, you know, asking the right question, making sure you've got sufficient information to progress, or indeed giving others,
Yeah,
a clear instruction, clear guidance on what you need, so that, and communicating as clearly and as thoroughly and comprehensively as you can as well. It's a really, really good example. And I agree. I mean, I think, your personal experiences, what you do outside of your day job, they're an incredible source of transferable wisdom, as it were, that you can bring into your BA role. I think there's you've given a perfectly good example there of where others are eliciting requirements from yourself, and you've got to try and inform those individuals of what those requirements are, potentially, giving a bit of priority as well as to what's
yeah,
important, the timeliness of some of this information, helping facilitate conversations with others and bring them together, are all very much part of the BA skill set as well. Yeah, for me, I think some very obvious examples I think about of bringing your personal life into BA and vice versa is really just
yes,
helping you,
absolutely.
with everyday problem solving, applying some of that
Yeah,
analytical thinking that we do as
yeah,
BAs. Maybe, yeah, probably bringing some of the empathy that we probably do show in our personal lives
absolutely.
into our professional lives. I think it's probably more likely to exist in a
Yeah,
personal level than professional. So I think it's probably something to
absolutely.
take that way.
But I think it's important to practice these skills in real life as well, so that you can, when you're actually applying them in your business analysis job, uh, because you have sharpened your sword, or because you have sharpened your skills, if I may say, you can easily execute them.
That's it. And I mean, it's that point. I mean, are there any experiences from your personal life that have unexpectedly taught you something that you could apply as a business analyst?
So things in my personal life that have unexpectedly taught me at my business analysis job.
That's right.
That's an interesting question. I mean, there are a lot of things, but I think I would like to build upon your insight about empathy. I think empathy has been, some one of the biggest skills, and I mean, when I think about empathizing with people in on a day-to-day life, and it's an extremely important skill in today's world, because one of the biggest problems that we face is that we are not able to understand each other's perspective, and we are so caught up in our own problems and in our own life struggles that we fail to understand what the other person is going through. So empathy is one of those skills that helps you understand the other's uh, struggle, others' pain, and then you can relate to them, and then you can. It helps you reach a consensus. It helps you build a connection with them. Now, I've been in a number of personal relationships, both romantically and with friends, and each one of those relationships have taught me something important. And I think that one of like by having empathy, I've been able to understand my friends and my partners in the past much better, and it's one of those things that you need to consistently practice. How it applies to the business analysis world, it can be as simple as uh, really when I'm trying to understand the pain points of my end users. Let's say we are building a product, I really want to understand what they go through on a day-to-day basis. Like how does it, and sometimes it can be as simple as, not everything relates to revenue or profits. If you are able to make the lives of your end users better, even by 1%, you have, either saved their time or you have made it easy for them, or you made them more satisfied at their job. And that's something that is really, really important in our job. So I always try to understand. I always use my empathy skills to understand the pain points of end users, to understand like how I can give them a better user experience. At the same time, I also try to practice empathy when I'm working with developers and QAs. So to give you an example, uh, often at times, the client comes to us and they say that they need a very small change, and it could be something as simple as adding a button, or just taking data from one system using an API. And this seems very simple on paper, but when you actually talk to a developer and try to understand, they will give you so many nuances and so many uh, background, that you realize that this job is much harder than it seems. You realize that uh, that when you're actually trying to source a certain information of a certain value from a system, or from a JSON code, or from or using an API, you need to be careful about so many number of things, whether it is integration with other systems, whether it is you need to understand how will this affect the communication with other systems, whether it's going to be synchronous or asynchronous, whether we're going to use is API the best method, or do we use Kafka, whether it is going to go through RabbitMQ, or whether it is going to go directly, whether we're going to use a GRAM webhook or
That's
not.
it. Yeah.
And then you try to, once you understand this and you realize that it's not simple, uh, you try to make sure that you write your acceptance criteria extremely clearly, so that it hello.
Yeah, that's right. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. So, I
yeah,
think it's
so
obviously
that
good.
when they're actually building their when they're actually developing something, it becomes easier for them to understand what needs to be developed. That's one. And secondly, they don't have to make any changes. The last thing I want to do is tell my developer, the next week, oh, I misunderstood the requirement. Actually, the client wanted this, but I wasn't able to explain it. So I don't want to, add more work to on their plate when they're already at full capacity. So
Yeah,
that's one of the skills I try to, I always try to make sure that I try to understand the perspective of all the people who I'm working with, all the stakeholders, and try to make their job easier by empathizing with them.
yeah, no, yeah, yeah. I think that's a really interesting point because I think thinking about developers as an example, trying to show empathy, putting yourself in their shoes, asking them questions relating to what it is they need from you, are all good starting points. They're all things actually that are very transferable if you're doing, any activity where you're not the expert on actually every component of it. Because you mentioned some development considerations there, and I generally don't pretend to be a development expert. I'm not, so I will ask questions from the developers, from the architects, what answers they need me to go and answer, and I will answer them. I might give them a view as well of other questions that I have seen that they probably should think about if they haven't already told me. And I guess that's somewhat similar if we take our sort of like examples from our personal life, because if you're planning like a holiday or you're moving home or you're doing something that's that you don't tend to do every day, there are going to be aspects of it that you're not familiar with. So for example, if you are, you know, if we just take renovating your home as an example, if you're renovating your home, yeah, you might be capable of certain jobs and certain activities, but you're
Yeah,
probably not capable of every single one of them. So
yeah,
you might need to take
absolutely.
into account, the requirements of your household, but then engage
Absolutely.
someone who is an expert, and make sure potentially as well that you
Yeah,
take wider perspectives from multiple experts, so that you're ultimately deciding on the right solution, but
yeah,
also perhaps so that you don't end up paying the most expensive price from
absolutely.
one supplier. So I think
Yeah.
they're all probably quite transferable. And of course, on top of all of that, just having that structure that we tend to introduce as business analysts, being able to communicate, being able to plan, being able to prepare, take the bigger picture, that can all help as well. And I
Yeah.
think I sort of got that from you when you were talking about, that empathy, understanding the stakeholders' pain points, working with developers, because essentially what you were describing there, a part of it was
Yeah.
being able to tell that story to be able to bring those stakeholders together so they can deliver what you need.
Yeah.
I wonder, I mean, build on that. I mean, how do you recognize any lessons that can be applied to business analysis? Because we spoke about a few examples
Yeah.
of certain lessons, but how do you recognize them?
It depends. Like it always starts from a place of curiosity. It's important to keep an open mind and have have conversations with people. I don't think you I don't think you specifically try to apply lessons. You just when you're trying to come across when you come across a problem or a challenge at work, and you really try to you really get stuck at it. You try to find answers, and sometimes the answers don't necessarily come out of work. It might come out of another place when you look when you are looking for another perspective. um, so I always try to keep an open mind and try to see how I can address this specific challenge at work. So, to give you an example, uh, I'm because uh, the Ashes are going on, and I'm a big cricket fan, being an Indian, and I always try to see, like, if there is something that I can I can really apply to work, which is bothering me. So like in one of the recent projects I was working in, uh, I felt that some of the conversations were going it was very difficult for me to navigate the conversations because the architects and the developers I was working with were really like experienced, and they were very demanding, and I was like, this is taking this is being really difficult for me. And then when I was watching Ashes, and I realized that this is like me being a batsman facing a new bowler who I've never faced before, and me just trying to get used to the new bowler. That's what it is. So it's little things. You don't really recognize a lesson. Like I would like to quote Steve Jobs here, who once said that you don't connect the dots looking forward, you connect the dots looking backwards. So you always think, how what can I do to uh, address this challenge, or what can I do to overcome this problem at work? And the answer could come from anywhere, whether it is something as simple as working with challenging stakeholders, or meeting difficult deadlines, or trying to stay calm under a lot of pressure. Once again, I do go back to cricket a lot, because a lot of the lessons that I've learned are from cricket, and by looking at cricketers. So so I just try to converse a lot, and try to stay curious about different things. And when I'm not able to get an answer directly, I just try to think, okay, what else can I do? Because I really don't understand where I'm going wrong. I just need a fresh perspective. And then, I forget about it. I switch off. And when I'm doing something completely different, like watching a cricket game, or, cooking, or taking a walk, or, driving, something hits me. Why don't I do this? this is just like that. It just reminds me of
Yeah.
my time when I was at business school, working on this project, or managing a club at my school. And when I was faced with a deadline, and how I was able to pull off a seemingly impossible task. So I just need to replicate that here. So that's how I think about things.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
having an example
Yeah.
such as cricket, something that's quite familiar to people, even if they're not necessarily cricketers or fans themselves, but everyone kind of knows. Most people know what it is. Or even in
Yeah.
the US, you can obviously translate it a little bit from to a baseball analogy
Yeah.
if need be. I
Yeah.
think people can sort of appreciate where you're coming from. You've got a way to communicate. Um, I think you're right about that starting from that open mind, that place of curiosity. I think for me as well, I think, in order to give you to recognize lessons that you can apply to business analysis in your day job, is really to give yourself the opportunity in the first place to observe others and observe practices, what people are doing, and indeed, be aware of what other techniques are out there, or approaches that you could bring into your day-to-day job. So I think just giving yourself time,
Yeah.
having that open mind, maybe being a bit self-aware, and just naturally seeking improvements and being curious is probably a
Yeah.
good start for recognizing the lessons that you can apply.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, beyond that, the next thing is probably then, how do you actually, how do you apply them? To, how do you apply, something learned outside of business analysis to business analysis itself? And for me,
Yeah.
I mean, it sort of goes back to some of the things we've talked about, around
Yeah.
starting with that curiosity, thinking
Yeah.
about the translation, thinking about, experimentation as well, as we need to. I think it's important not to as well just try and do a copy and paste from what you might have
Exactly.
experienced in your own life, and try and apply it to your work scenario.
Exactly.
Because of course, in a similar way, you can't copy and paste experience from a past project to the current one. But you
Yeah.
can take little extracts, little
Absolutely.
perspectives, join it together
Yeah.
to hopefully, translate, or bring in some of the principles anyway,
Yeah.
rather than necessarily the practice as well. So there's some of the things that I do to apply
Yeah.
some of that, that what I've learned, outside of BA and bringing into BA. But I wonder, so how do you do that? How do you apply something you've learned, and bring it into BA?
Very similar to what you do, but I would like to add on to your point.
Yeah,
While
sure.
you might not, copy and paste, the exact same solutions to a project that you have worked out in the past. But what you can copy and paste is the mindset, the way you handle the situation, the mentality, or your preparation, how you prepared for it. So these are some of the things that you can take. And sometimes you're more conscious about what you want to do, and sometimes that's less conscious. Uh, so one of the things like I did in the past was joining Toastmasters, the public speaking program. And I wanted to become a more confident public speaker. And that was a very conscious choice. And when I used to give speeches and rehearse for speeches, and when I used to do table topics sessions, I just became more confident, and I could see the change when I was sitting in my elicitation sessions. I just could navigate uh, impromptu questions more easily. I could, you know, ask better questions, be more calmer in these meetings because I had practiced my speaking skills. So that was more of a conscious choice, and sometimes it's less conscious where you don't even realize, uh, you did something in the past. Like for example, when I was in my business school, I was running a club, and I was the president of the club. And uh, as a president, I had to deal with multiple stakeholders. Whenever I was organizing events, I had to deal with the guests, and the speakers who I had to invite. Then there were vendors who I had to coordinate with. There were caterers who had to work with to make sure that if we are getting food. So running this club over a period of 6 months taught me a lot about stakeholder management and the challenges you have when you're working with different stakeholders. And when I went into my job as a business analyst, I realized that a big part of my job is stakeholder management. Whether you're working, because you're working with clients, you're working with uh, architects, developers, then you're working with your uh, uh, you're working with other business analysts as well at times. You're working with product managers, product owners, and there are so many layers to each and everything, and you need to communicate differently with different stakeholders.
Yeah.
So I never realized that, what I learned from, you know, as running a what I learned from running a club at my business school will ever be helpful in my day-to-day job, but it was. So this was a very unconscious lesson that I learned, and I was able to translate it, and it still surprises me that, how the lessons that I learned from running a club, which was 4 to 5 years back, helped me till date today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's probably reassuring as well to know there's loads of opportunities out there
yeah,
to pick up, little improvements that you can make to your day job and that you can apply in. And I think the reason why it's reassuring is because, when it comes to business analysis, there's so much to learn, so much to practice, that, if you can think about actually parallel scenarios where you're actually doing things that are quite similar actually in your day-to-day business, then maybe it can help people feel like learning these techniques is not quite as daunting as it might otherwise seem. And I
yeah,
think generally, there are some complicated things we do, but generally
yeah.
we're knitting together a whole bunch of fairly simple things together in a relevant order and adding some structure and some rigor to the situation. So I think that can certainly help. I wonder, is there any sort of like surprising place or person that you might have learned a lesson from that has improved your analysis?
Again, I would like to go back to cricket because
Please
that's
do.
it is so surprising how much I've learned from that game, and just by observing and looking at the game closely, and it can be as simple as you realizing the role that you need to play, because at certain times of the project you need to play a very different role. Sometimes you play the role of an opening batsman where you need to give your team a good head start, and you can do that by making sure that you have everything in place, right from something as simple as the definition of creating a definition of done with your development team, to making sure how we going to you know manage conflicts and give feedback to each other, so that so that we grow together as a team, to something when you are closing, when you're near to a release, you play the role of a finisher. So you play you are someone like a Ben Stokes or MS Dhoni, where you are like, I don't really care about following all the methods. You just want to make sure that you are able to get as many runs as possible, just like cricketers do. At that point in time, when you are close to a release, you want to make sure that you get all the things that you need to develop. That's one. Number two, you need to make sure that you get the time to test your code, so that you can identify defects. And lastly, you are able to meet your deadline, because that is important. So at that time you are under pressure, so you play the role of a finisher, and it would be bizarre to play the role of an opening batsman at that time. Similarly, something else that I do is that, depending on the project, I look at what is it that I need to do. So if a project is long, and it's a collaborative project where this will go over a period of 1 to 2 years, you know that you need to take it slow, and you need to be in the test cricket mode, where you need to be methodical. You need to be patient. You need to be calm, and you need to take one a sprint at a time, just like they take one over at a time. But if it's a hot fix, or maybe if it is like uh, a 1 month, or if it's a change requirement, you know that this is not exactly the time where you will get the time to do, uh, you know, 2 months of analysis, and you need to be fast, you need to be quick, and you need to be on your toes. So that's when you play the role of a T20 cricket player, where you are like, you just hit the ground, you get what you need to get, and you start and you try to close the, all the gaps, and you try to get all the requirements refined as soon as possible so that the developers can start developing. So yeah, cricket has taught me a lot, and it's interesting that uh, I keep going back to it for my lessons and for the skills that I need to apply to my projects.
I mean, I think it's a really good example. I mean, it was interesting as well. Some things that, when you start talking about, the roles within the team, of course, as a BA, you've got to be aware that you're not the only individual that can deliver. It's actually the whole team, similar with a cricket team as well.
Yeah.
And part of that is not just having that appreciation. It's also appreciating what other members of the team are doing. So you might not necessarily be an expert batsman, as an
Yeah.
example, but you should know what they're doing. You
Yeah.
might not be an expert fielder, but you should know
Yeah.
what they're doing, what they need from you, what support they might need.
Yeah.
And I think in a very similar way, in our day-to-day careers, we need to know really sort of like the mentality of developers and the testers and the business stakeholders we work with, what they might need from us. We need to be able to work with them, be part of a team, and actually integrate ourselves with many teams all at once as well, and be a
Absolutely.
valuable part of it.
Absolutely.
So I think your example is a very, very good one, and it's interesting. I mean, I
I'm
tend
curious to
to
know.
focus on
Yeah,
football, to
I'm
be
curious
fair.
to know if there is something on your side, like if there is a surprising place that you have learned from.
Yes, I mean, I think for me, I think I'll take football as an
Yeah.
example.
Okay.
So I think one of the areas where football provides quite an interesting dimension, and I might mention this on other occasions, is during big tournaments, World Cups,
Yeah.
finals, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really interesting visualizations that are published in, on the TV, in newspapers, in magazines. Are all quite interesting ways to represent performance data, comparison statistics, whatever it might be. And actually, they're lessons to take from, and I have to try and think about
Yeah.
actually, could they be useful to bring into the BA
Okay.
situation?
Yeah.
And I think the overarching thing I get from looking at these visualizations, if I pick that example, is that in almost all cases they're fairly simple. They don't. The viewer doesn't need to have been an expert on that visualization
Yeah.
technique, but it's clearly organising the information that the producer, i.e., the business analyst, is
Yeah.
aware of. I think that's quite a big lesson. I think it builds on, albeit from a different perspective, the scenario that you called out. We've spoken about, just then, surprising places where we might be able to learn, learn lessons to bring into our roles. I think a good source of lessons sometimes are mistakes and errors, and where we don't do things as well as we should. Are there any real world mistakes or errors that you can think of, so that you're open to share, that might have shaped how you approach analysis today, or how you approach your communication or change in
Yeah.
general?
It's interesting. But a lot of the mistakes that I've made are in my dating life, if I may say so. And some of those, each relationship taught me what not to do, if I may say. And it's something. It often comes down to very simple things, but I think listening is really important. Making assumptions is a bad thing, and it's always good to clarify things when you're not sure. So I was dating a woman once, and I like she told me she's from this place in India, and I made a joke, um, which didn't come across well, and she felt that I was being stereotypical, and she said that I didn't find this funny, and I'm like, I'm sorry, and she was like, why did you assume that I would be doing this? I'm like, I'm not sure. She's like, you don't make assumptions, ask questions. And I'm like, okay, I'll keep that in mind. And it's interesting how this is such a simple lesson, but at the same time, it also applies to the world of business analysis. When you are working on requirements, uh, you know, uh, or when you're working on different systems, or working on architecture of systems, uh, it's wrong to make assumptions. It's wrong to assume that this is what the customer wants, or this is how our systems work. If you're not sure, it is good to clarify. It's good to ask questions until you know for sure that this is how the as is, and this is what we want the to be, or the future state to be. So that's one of the places where I learned a lot about, like, my dating life taught me a lot about what not to do. And I try to keep those things in mind when I'm working as a business analyst.
Yeah, I think that's a great example actually, because it could also you know, it's a great example of a situation where you absolutely need to listen to the other
Yeah,
person, understand the needs of the
yeah,
stakeholders, and it's definitely the feedback will be a little bit more real time if you're not getting it right in that
yeah,
scenario as opposed to your day to day. I think it's a really, really, really good example. And it's another example, I think, of where people can think about situations that are definitely not affiliated to business analysis, but they definitely could do as well.
yeah,
Um, and for me, I think, on a similar line, there's definitely been many times where, you sort of tried to share an instruction, give your view of what you need,
yeah,
not do that in an effective manner, and therefore the outcomes are not quite what you expected. I mean, I remember having some work done at a previous house of mine, and I think it took about 3 to 4 iterations of communication backwards and
yeah,
forwards with the builder to get them to understand what I needed, and in between that was 3 or 4 versions of the wall that I didn't need until
yeah,
ultimately we got there, you know. And and it's definitely, it makes me think, now I think about that scenario, um, perhaps by visualizing what was in my head in terms of the constraints and the requirements around that particular bit of construction would
yeah,
have possibly helped anyway.
definitely.
Maybe a few better questions along the way as well.
Yeah,
Maybe a bit more clarification and better documentation as well on the part of
absolutely,
the builder
absolutely.
would have been good.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think yeah, just to finish, I think what you said as well about learning what not to do
exactly.
is
Yeah,
really powerful as well, because it can be quite obvious sometimes to think about what can I learn to take
yeah,
forward, but
yeah,
sometimes actually there's things that just go wrong, and
yeah.
therefore if you can learn from that and not repeat it, then brilliant. You'll be better off for it, I'm sure.
Mm.
Um, I mean, are there any? I mean, going beyond sort of like mistakes and issues, are there any sort of life experiences that you think might have influenced how you lead, how you provide mentorship, or perhaps communicate with your team as a VA leader?
That's a very good question. I've had the opportunity to mentor and coach junior BAs in the past, and I always try to do it from a place where, you know, when it again comes down to empathy. Often at times, like I have had great mentors in the past who I've learned a lot from, and I try to replicate what they did, but also at the same time, I try to put myself in the position, and I was like, if I was a new BA who had little to zero experience and had to start from scratch and had to be in a place where I had to learn how to work on such elaborate projects with challenging stakeholders. What were the lessons I would have wanted my senior BA to teach me, or my manager to teach me? So I put myself in a hypothetical situation, and I often ask myself what I would want to, how I would have wanted to be treated. Again, it comes down to empathy, empathy for empathy for my previous or my former self, if I may say, and empathy for the junior BAs at the same time. And I try to go forward from there. Uh, the other thing that I do is I I always try to get everyone on the same page. So while this is something, this might be something very it might sound very elementary and trivial, but I think it's important. uh, Getting everyone aligned in the team is a really, really important skill as a as a business analyst. And whenever I'm working on a project, I make sure that at any given point in time, everyone is aligned. And I do this, very simply, whether it is by, sending emails, sending meeting notes, creating a page on Confluence, where I share the access with everyone to that page, having regular check-ins and making sure that everyone is aligned and is on the same page so that there are no communication gaps. Because I do feel that a lot of the times uh, things can be easily resolved. Like as a leader, I try to make sure that everyone is aligned and at the same page at any given point in time, so that no one feels that they are being excluded, or they don't have the answers, or they have to wait for certain information. But uh, once they are aligned, they know what is the next step and what they need to work on. So
Yeah,
even if it is not my job exactly to make sure everyone is aligned, I try my best to make sure that everyone knows what is coming. If there are any risks, they are notified in advance. If they are, even if it is as simple as what we have done well so far, I make sure that everyone knows that, because it is important that they're not in a place where they have to uh, talk about a certain thing with regards to the project, and they have no idea.
yeah.
So
No, I
that's
think
what
that's right. Yeah, and I think
that,
again, it's so important to get people on, the stakeholders on the same page. If you're to practice that and use other opportunities to build that skill, then it's definitely worthwhile. I mean, I imagine, even just in your cricket scenarios, that there's
yeah,
plenty of times where you need to get the team on the same page, so that they can all understand
exactly.
why a certain strategy or tactic is being
Yeah,
employed, what you're trying to achieve, what the benefits of doing so. So I
yeah,
think that's really important. I think we can probably all relate to scenarios in our professional life where there are times where not everybody has been aligned and the delivery hasn't gone as well as it could. Whereas
yeah,
if you bring
absolutely.
people together and
Yeah,
where you're heading, given the opportunity to grow and develop as a team, I think yeah, it's a really good example. I think it sort of lends itself quite nicely to my perspective on this one in terms of, I think life experiences and my influence the way I lead is really important lessons around treating people how you wish to be treated, and
absolutely.
therefore use every opportunity where you've got control of such things to eradicate the
Yeah,
practices that you don't like. So as an
yeah,
example, I think sometimes when
yeah,
things are delegated to you and you don't really have either the support or the skill set or the background
yeah.
to really make a success of it, that's a
Yeah,
terrible scenario. So I think when you're delegating, if you're somebody that doesn't appreciate that way of being delegated to, then I think you owe it to when you delegate to your team to make sure they
and
have all the support, the skills, and the right advice to move forward successfully.
And sometimes I also ask myself, what would I, when I'm not sure what to do, or when I'm not sure how I should communicate this to the stakeholder, I ask myself, how would I want my junior to communicate? So if I was training a junior BA, would I tell them to send an email, or would I tell them to set up a meeting to discuss this in person? And that gives me the answer. Okay, if I would tell this to my junior BA, then I should do the same thing, because the rules won't change. So
That's it.
sometimes
Yeah.
it's about uh, you know when you are trying to train someone. when you're trying to coach someone as a leader, you it also teaches you that what you need to do or what you don't need to do.
Yeah, I think you've touched on another example of where you obviously learn the benefits of teaching others and being a mentor, so that now you can apply, the improvements you've made as a result of that. So I think, yeah, perfectly valid points you made there. I mean, it makes me think as well. I mean, so many things so far. I mean, do you have a personal philosophy or a habit outside of work that you think might help you handle challenges of your business analysis role?
I do actually. So I strongly believe that how we have iterations of a product, and we have versions of a product, that this is version 3.0 or 3.2 or 3 or 4.6. I strongly feel that we as business analysts also have versions or iterations, if I may say. I just
Yeah,
feel that over a period of time, we with experience, we learn skills, and we learn how to deal with different challenges, and and we gain knowledge, uh, that we have a different version. And like right now, I feel I'm Sagar 4.0, and what Sagar 4.0 can do, Sagar 3.0 couldn't do. So the idea is incremental improvement as a business analyst, and I always try to learn and improve myself as a BA, whether it is whether it is through experience, whether it is through certifications, whether it is talking to other business analysts. But incremental improvement definitely helps. And once you see that when you grow as a business analyst, you also are able to work on more complicated projects, more elaborate projects, which are very, very demanding. So that's my philosophy. Grow yourself as a business analyst, and over a period of time, your uh, revised version or iteration of yourself will reach a point where who will be able to take on far more bigger challenges than you have done in the past.
yeah. I mean, I really like that example. I think it's really interesting to think
Yeah,
about and think about ourselves as like with our major and minor releases or
yeah,
improvements. You can almost see that perhaps someone, as they move career and they might transition from a PMO into a BA and into a project manager, perhaps if they want to go that way, that there's almost like those big releases, and
yeah.
and then there's the little incremental improvements that you make as well. So I think, yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. My example is not going to be anywhere near
Yeah.
as interesting as that. I
Please
will
go
say
on.
that, but I think sort of habit or personal philosophy is really just around, just taking a walk sometimes. Taking yourself away from the situation so that you can have a greater sense of perspective when you come back to it. I think when you're in the moment and there's so many things moving around, decisions flying around, people, perspectives, it can be difficult to digest all of the information. Whereas if you take a walk,
Yeah.
actually take yourself away from the scenario,
Definitely. I
digest
couldn't
the
agree
information,
more with you.
bring it back.
Yeah, walking helps you clear your mind. It gives you, it just gives you a minute to breathe and just forget about what you are working on, especially if you are dealing with a lot, and you have so much going on in your head that when you take a short walk, it helps you clear up your mind, and when you get back to work, it gives you a fresh perspective. So I think that's actually a great habit, and I've done it myself in the past, so I can vouch for that. Yeah,
I mean, there's so many things. I think we've opened up such a big topic here to talk about the real world scenarios. We probably could talk for another couple of hours, but we won't.
absolutely.
I'll be
Yeah,
pleased to know. But yeah, I think that's probably a nice place to draw things to a close. So yeah, definitely appreciate your perspective. There's been some really interesting, loads of interesting points
yeah,
that you recognise. So I'm sure the viewers will find it interesting. Really did like that 4.0, 3.0 problem. That was really good. Yeah, so I'll look forward to speaking to you again, I'm sure. And for
absolutely.
everybody else, yeah, look forward to being on these sessions. But yeah, in the
Yeah,
meantime, thank you, Sagan. And
thank you so much, John. Great talking to you, and I wish you a very happy holidays.
likewise, yeah, thank you.